Hello, creative friends. Coming to you again with another art journal page. Not sure what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go with this again, which seems to be my motto here lately. I'm just going to start putting some paint on the page and see where it takes me. So I hope you enjoy the video, and thanks for watching. Okay, so here I'm showing you the 3, 4, 5 different colors of craft paint that I picked out to use on this page. I don't remember if I used all of them, but I think I used most, if not all. And I grabbed a stencil. I'm starting this off like I have done some of the other journal pages in the past, where I take acrylic paint and different pattern stencils, and there I've just turned the stencil over and rolled it, used a roller to kind of get some of that color off, and then I'm using a brush to try to use up that blue. But I'm trying to start this stencil, or I'm sorry, start this journal page like I have done other journal pages, where I use different colors and different stencils and different patterns to create a background. I really like using this technique. I think it really makes the background interesting. And the last journal page and background that I made was with the hearts, laugh, love, and live. And I just really like the way it turned out. And I've had this, I wanted to do something similar to that and create another page, but this time in the portrait position instead of the landscape. And so here I have another stencil, and I'm using, this is actually kind of a pumpkin orange. It's not a very bright orange, but I really do like the color that it is. And this is a Tracy Baltise stencil that I'm using. I like this stencil. It's got a really pretty pattern. And I always, or I try to, I shouldn't say always, but I do try to have the stencil go off the edge of the page. I think that kind of helps a little bit, to where everything's not like right in the middle or right in the center of the page. It just adds more interest. I've had this peacock feather stencil, and I thought it would really be neat to do kind of like a red with center, and then of course the yellow, and then try to blend the two together to again add something more to this page, a little more interest. As you can see, it doesn't really show up as much as I would have liked it to, but you know, it is what it is. And so there you have it. And as you can see, the yellow and the red mixing is kind of turning it orangey. So the second one actually stands out and looks a little bit better than the first. And actually, those peacock feathers kind of gave me an idea, something that I had been rolling around in my head for a while that I wanted to do, and that was to do a face with a mask, like a Madi Gra mask, and of course all these bright colors and everything. I thought, oh wow, this would be a great page to do something like that on. And here I'm showing you that I'm using the Dilution ink sprays for this page, because again, trying to put some color on the background. I don't really particularly care for all that white. I don't know why I don't like white to see white on my pages. I mean, I don't mind it, I guess. Like you'll see in a minute that I will be putting some white back on the page, funny enough, with some white paint. but for now I wanted all the white of the paper and the background to be a color. I didn't want it just white. So here I sprayed some water on a baby wipe because all my baby wipes have dried up, and I'm just trying to take some of that color off of some of the acrylic paint to try to bring some of the color back to the acrylic paint, and I'm giving it a quick dry. And here is where I decided to draw this face from a magazine. There's a lot of videos out there on how to draw faces, and the best way to learn is to draw an oval and then draw a line down the center of the oval and then across the center of the oval as well from left to right, and then from that line to the bottom of the oval draw another line cutting that in half, and then which is where the nose would go. The first line in the middle would be the eyes, and then do a line between the nose line and the bottom of the oval for the mouth. But here I just, took a face from a magazine and just started drawing it out on this paper. And then once I got the basic outlines of the eyes and the nose and the mouth, then I started to figure out how this mask was going to fit on the face. So I'm sketching out here the mask and adjusting, accordingly until I got it to how I like, how I wanted it, or how I think it, it looks good. And then erasing any extra lines that might be there that I no longer need. And I did this in another spiral art journal, so it's pretty heavy duty paper. I will be painting this, and so of course I wanted it on heavier paper, whereas once I started to add paint to it, it would be able to take the paint and not buckle on me, whereas a thinner paper would have buckled. And I decided to do it on this heavy duty paper so that I could also cut it out and then put it on my journal page where I did the background. So here I'm putting out some paints to paint the face, and all of my paints are just acrylic paints, nothing really fancy. And the paints that I pick for the skin tone is pink, white, and orange. So I put a little bit of pink into my white, and then I add touches of orange to it. I test it. Here I'm testing it on the page, and I think, yeah, that looks pretty good. Put out some more white because I'll need that to put highlights on the face. And then I'll add a little more touches of orange to do a little bit darker skin tones for shadowy areas, which is what I'm doing here. And I really like this combination for skin tones, the pink and with a touch of orange. It's an easy combination for a skin tone, and it's easy to adjust. You can add more white. You can, if you want it lighter, you can add more pink if you want it to be more of a pink tone, or you can add a little bit more orange if you want it to be a darker skin tone. So it's really easy to adjust. The only thing about using these acrylic paints when you're doing something like this is they do dry quicker than I would like them to dry. So it made it a little bit more challenging to go back in and add highlights and shadows and stuff, because it was drying quicker than I had a chance to go back and add to it. So it was a little bit of a challenge, but I managed to keep working at it and getting it to a stage where I was happy with it. And of course in the cheek area, I'm adding just a little bit more pink to the cheeks and to the chin. And then trying to add a little bit more white for highlights on the forehead and then the nose area. And then working on the neck. The trying to get the darker skin tone under the neck just wasn't dark enough or working for me. It wasn't like showing enough of a shadow, so I decided to put touches of black into it, which probably, I don't know if that's the best way to do it or not, but that's the way I did it on this, and that did help, to put that shadow underneath the neck like I wanted it. And I'm adding a little bit more shadow underneath where the mask is, so it looks a little bit more three-dimensional or not so two-dimensional. And I dripped a little bit of black on the face where I didn't want it, so I was trying to get it off. And here, trying to put a little bit more shadow underneath the lips and the nose and around the mouth. And around the face. I do end up going back in afterwards, after I get this down on my page, and using a graphite pencil to try to add more detail into the face. I think it really turned out pretty good. I was happy with it, which, that's the important thing, being happy with the drawing or the painting or the journal page, that you're working with. And here I'm trying to mix some more of that skin tone because I kind of ran out and I needed to do around the eyes, and trying to get as close as possible to what I was using before. I didn't quite make up enough of it before, and so getting that on there, and now using some red paint to paint the lips. And I really like this red color. It's like a red rose or a red lipstick color. Red's my favorite color anyway of all the colors, so I use red a lot in my journal pages. And I found, since I've started doing art journaling, that one of my other favorite colors is turquoise. I just love turquoise using turquoise in my journal pages as well. And here I'm trying to define the lips more with a shadow to separate the lips, and adding some highlights on the lips and shadow underneath the lips. I also do a quick painting of the eyes, but I don't really do a whole lot of detail in the eyes, 'cause, like I said, after I get this on the journal page, that's where I use a black felt tip marker and a graphite pencil to try to give more detail into the eyes and the face. And here I'm just touching up areas, adding more shadows, um, trying to shape the lips the way that I wanted them to be shaped. And here's where I'm adding in the blue to the eyes. I really love the picture of the woman with the bright blue eyes and the red lips. I just thought that was just really pretty. So this video ended up being probably I think it's probably my longest video. There was a lot though that I ended up putting into this art journal page, and I wanted to show how I made the face, how I drew the face, how I painted the face. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are interested in doing faces and like to see, because I know I like to see, videos of how people draw faces, paint faces, and whatnot. So I thought I would show how I like to do my faces. And so I'm adding a little bit of black in there for the pupil. And like I said, I don't do a whole lot of detail on the eyes with the paint, but I do just enough so that when I go back in to do details with the graphite and the felt tip, then there's enough coloring with the paint to at least help get the eye started. And here I'm painting the mask. I was just going to do like a jet black mask, but it just seems so stark on the face, and I didn't really particularly care for it, so I was adding blue. I had some of that blue paint that I use for her eyes on my plate, so I decided to add blue into the black, and I really like the color that it turned out to be. It's not, like I said, the stark jet black. It kind of has a bluish tint to it, which is really nice and complements the face and the eyes much better. And the brush that I'm using is an angled brush that really helps you. And there I'm adding some more blue to my plate. I had run out of the blue, and it was the black was getting too black. But the angle brush, it really helps you kind of get around those edges and get right up close and draw out with the paint. And then I ended up using here I'm fixing a spot on her forehead where I had gotten some black paint. For her hair, I ended up using some brown and some burgundy. Here I'm putting out some brown and some, well, it's actually not a brown, but a rust and a burgundy, adding some white highlights to her eyes. Because I realized, well, if I'm going to put highlights in her eyes, now would probably be a good time. I could have done it instead of with white paint. I could have done it with a white Stabilo pencil I have, but I thought that, since I had the white paint on the plate, I would go ahead and put it out there, put the highlights in her eyes now. While I was working on this face with the paints. And here I put down the rust color, and then I came back with the burgundy and tried to do like some streaks of burgundy. And I do also go in with some white to add some highlights to the hair. And you'll see that here in a minute too. Again, This acrylic paints are a little bit more of a challenge to work with because they dry so fast, and it was drying faster than I could get, the colors blended together and the highlights in there like I was wanting them to be. But in the end, it all worked out, so I was happy with the results. You can see I'm adding some highlights to that side, but then when I go to the other side, it's already dried, so it makes it a little bit more challenging. I'm continuing to paint her hair, the sides of her hair. I decided to give her this long flowing brown hair. And I think, it frames her face out really nicely. And I had a lot of fun decorating the mask, the Madi Gra mask. That was one of the things that I was thinking of when I was thinking of doing this idea. I was like, oh my gosh, all the possibilities, all the different shapes and designs and things that you could do. What fun would that be? And I have a small, like, little um, notebook that whenever I come up with ideas, I just kind of jot them down in the notebook. And every once in a while, I will go back and look if I run out of things like ideas and whatnot. I'll go back and look at the notebook to see if there's any ideas I've jotted down that maybe I could try or whatever. And this is one of the ideas in my notebook that I had jotted down a while back, and actually it's been quite a while now, and I've decided to do it. And I don't know why it took me so long to do it. I think one of the things was I kept thinking of, at the time when I jotted it down, I was like, oh, that's such a cool idea, that would be fun. But I was still not completely sure about the, you know, drawing the face and how I would actually execute that. I'm still fairly new to face drawing, but I am beginning to feel more and more comfortable with it. And so I guess it just got to a point where I'm like, you know what, I think I can do this. I think, this would be fun to do, and I felt comfortable enough to try something this big. So here is where I'm adding details with the Sharpie fine tip felt tip marker, and going around the nose and the mouth and the eyes and adding all the little details. And I do come back in, like I said, after it gets put on the page with graphite, because the shadows just seem like they needed more definition to me afterward. So I'm continuing to work on the eyes and add in details, eyelashes. Here I'm adding the eyelashes with the little fine tip felt tip marker. I've tried using like a very fine paintbrush and black paint to do eyelashes and all the little details in the eyes, and I tell you, this is a much easier process to just use the felt tip marker and than to try to do it with a paintbrush. Doing it with a paintbrush is definitely a challenge, to say the least. Here I put out some white so I could add some white to the eyes, because I didn't originally put any white in the eyes. I put some white highlights on the blue parts of the eyes, but I didn't really color in the whites of the eyes, and I felt like that they needed to be painted in, and also that allowed for me to be able to do some shadowing around the eyes in the white area as well, and in the corners, to shadow those a little bit more, to make them, you know, seem at least a little bit more three-dimensional and not so two-dimensional. So I'm just trying to finish up the details in the eyes here and get them to, you know, where I'm happy with them. I'm going around the whole mask here with another Sharpie, the black marker. This is a little bit of a bigger marker. I wanted to just clean up the edges of the mask and define the edges of the mask better. And I'm also doing the same with the hair, trying to add a little bit more detail and definition to her hair with the black Sharpie marker, and clean that up as well. The, you know, edges of the mask and the hair wasn't as, I guess, straight or whatever, or clean and smooth or whatever as I would have liked it to be. So I thought that this would help kind of define those a little better and add some more shadowing, especially closer to the face, underneath, like where the hair would be darker. The underneath of the hair that's closest to the neck and the face would be a little bit darker. So here I tore it out and I'm just cutting it out quickly, and it's actually I you know, imagine that it was going to be a lot more complicated to cut out, but it actually ended up being quite simple. As you can see, it took me no time at all. The way I had drawn it, I was just able to just cut right around it without, you know, getting too fussy about it. And here, when the way that I had cut the bottom, it needed some touching up because it left a little bit of the white paper. So here I'm just touching up the very bottoms of the neck and then the hairline. With the paint, I had had some of the paint left, so I'm using that to just touch up the hair, and the black marker again just to finish and have the rest of it come down and all look uniform, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm going also, you could see around the edges the white of the paper. I didn't particularly care for that, so here I'm trying to just go around the edges to make sure that any of the white paper is covered with the black marker so it's not showing. And there's, you see it on the page, but again the page is fairly dark, and so I do end up lightening it up a little bit. Here's the acrylic gesso, and I'm putting little bits of it here and there, and then using my roller to roll it around and spread it out really good. I didn't want it on there so thick that, you know, it covered everything up, but I did want it on there enough to tone it down the background. And so I sprayed a little bit of water onto the page, and then I'm just using a baby wipe to kind of rub the gesso around for, you know, for one, to make sure that it covers the whole page, and for two, to make sure that it doesn't get too thick in any one area to where you can't at least see some of the pattern and colors of the background. And I'm going to use some bubble wrap here on the background. On a previous page I used the bubble wrap, and I really like the way it turned out. So I'm using it again here, but when the first put it on there, it just seemed, like just too defined, too bright, too much. And so that's why I was kind of rubbing it to tone it down a little bit, because it was, I wanted to lighten the background, but I didn't want it to be stark white. I just wanted it to be kind of a muted white, and I think it looks pretty because it makes it look like there's like lights or something, in the background. So I like the way that it looks. I decided not to use the smaller bubble wrap. On the last page I used the smaller bubble wrap and the big bubble wrap. I used both, but on this one I just was happy. By the time I was done stamping with the big bubble wrap, I was happy with the effect and the page. So I decided to go ahead and just glue down my image. I'm using Mod Podge to glue this down. I typically like to use Mod Podge over the top of images because it gives a nice shiny, gloss to it. But I don't like that it'll also make your pages kind of stick together, so that I'm not too keen about. But for this particular page, I just used it as an adhesive just to glue the image down. And here's some deli paper. I was playing around with a jelly plate and had these pieces of deli paper where I was cleaning off the jelly plate, and I thought I had originally got out my sketchbook and was going to try to sketch some feathers to go in on the headpiece or the mask. And then I got the idea, oh wow, I got that deli paper with that, the different paints on there from when I was playing around with the jelly plate. That would be perfect, because then it'd be thin, it'd be somewhat translucent, and I just really like the colors as well, and I thought the colors would go really well with this layout. So it just all worked out perfectly. So here I'm cutting out the flowers, or I'm sorry, not flowers, the feathers. And here's a different shaped feather that I'm cutting out of the orange. I cut out quite a few feathers, and I play around with them to try to decide, to play with them in different combinations to figure out how I want to place them on the mask. And here's some smaller feathers that I cut out from the deli paper that had orange paint on it. And I'm wanting to, I just folded, as you might have seen, the orange deli paper. I just folded it in like 3s or 4s or something like that, and just kind of did a quick cut out of a feather shape. But I didn't draw it out, so they didn't have the black outline to it like the other feathers did. So all I was doing is just adding that to those smaller feathers, the black outline, just so that they all matched. And here I'm adding the center line and then the lines for the, to make them look more like feathers. I'm really glad I used deli paper for this, because what I end up doing with these really worked out well with the thinner deli papers. So here I'm showing you, I put a piece of double stick tape on the back, and then I have a wire that I glued down to where the center line would be, and I cut it. And then I took a pair of scissors and just started, well, here I'm trimming off the little bit of the double stick tape that was showing out from the edges of the feather, and I'm using scissors to cut each of those little, I don't know what you call them, quills or whatever, in the feather. So it makes it more feather-like, I guess. And I thought that the wire on the back would kind of give that ridge. And there's the orange one that I did, the bigger orange one I had already done. So I thought the wire would help give the ridge and down the center of the feather when I put them down on the page. So here's where the fun really begins. I have these glitter paints. I actually bought these glitter paints for my granddaughter, but I also use them too because from time to time because they are a lot of fun to play with. So here I'm just using these glitter glue, and they're in these little bottles with a pretty fine tip where, as you can see, I'm able to draw with them. And I'm using different colors just to decorate this mask. And this was a lot of fun decorating the mask. I kind of ended up, when I did the middle part, um, I kind of wanted, I guess, some kind of something there, some kind of shape, like maybe a butterfly or something, but didn't quite turn out. Here's where I'm trying to do the middle. I wanted it kind of to be like a butterfly or something. It didn't quite turn out. It looked more like a blob than anything. I was using a little skewer to try to fix it, but yeah, that didn't help. So, but in the end, here I'm adding some little red dots. In the end, I actually ended up putting some gems on the mask to kind of decorate it even more. So I'm using the Sharpie, the fine tip Sharpie, to try to add some more detail and definition to the face. And then here's, I believe, where I get my graphite pencil because yes, the graphite pencil, I just felt like that the face needed some more shading. And actually, this was a little bit dangerous because for me to try to do this at this point because I did not wait for that glitter glue to dry. It was still wet, so I was trying to be very careful and, and not mess up. And luckily, I don't know how I did it, but luckily I was able to um, do the shading and not mess up the glitter glue. That was pretty amazing because typically, yeah, I would just have that completely a mess. So I'm just adding shading with the graphite pencils to her face. The one thing I don't, I love the look of the graphite pencil for the shading on the page itself, but in the video and in the pictures, the graphite tends to be a little too shiny and catches the light, and so it makes it a little bit harder to see, how it looks. Because as you can see, like here at this point, it just looks like a silvery line or a bright, line around like the mask and stuff. But it actually does look better, on the page itself. So that's the only thing I don't like about graphite. I mean, I guess I could have used a Stabilo, black Stabilo pencil or something, and wet that down and kind of, you know, use that to do the shading with. But um, either one would have worked, I suppose. So, and I have a stump that I'm using to, right there is a stump that I'm using to kind of spread that out and shade it around in the areas where I wanted it to be shaded, so that you just didn't see it just a straight pencil line. Um, so I did wait. At this point, I did wait for the glitter glue to dry, so it is dry. And I decided that I wanted some of these feathers to kind of have some dimension to them. And so I had this foam tape that I put on the back of some of these feathers so that they would be more dimensional. And here I'm pinching where that wire is in the middle of the feather, so that that is more defined, and you can see the wire and the dimension of it, and it looks more like, you know, a feather with a rib in it. So I really was happy the way these feathers turned out. They really turned out pretty neat, and I had some Prima Flowers that I went through, and I didn't want to show the whole, trying to figure out which flowers that, you know, I wanted to put together to put on this, because that can take some time to try to come up with a combination that I'm happy with. But I did finally come up with this combination of flowers that I liked, and so I just put a little brad on those. And then here I'm sticking them all down. The bigger feather in the back does not have, it just had the double-sided tape with the wire down the center. And then these others have the foam tape on the back to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm just peeling off the second piece of paper off the other side of the foam tape, so I can stick those down. And then I also put foam tape. Actually, I double layered the foam tape on the back of the flowers, so because it was so, the feathers were kind of thick by the time they were stuck down on top of each other. So the flower just seemed like it needed to be up a little bit more, so I put two pieces on top of each other to make that a little bit thicker. And I had these gems left over from some project, some scrapbooking project that I had done, you know, a long time ago. So I thought, oh, these will, you know, really be pretty on this mask. And so I just started sticking these little gems down all over the mask. And it's, you know, really added to the mask and making it look very festive. And they were all different colors, so I just was, you know, sticking them all over the place in different areas where, you know, I thought it could use a gem. And like I said, this video is probably one of my longest. If you're still with me, I'm really glad that you're stuck around to watch the full video. I know everybody's very busy. I am very busy. So I appreciate everyone that watches my videos. And here I'm decided to put Madi Gra with some ink and a quill. I really like the way the quill writes. I do not like my handwriting, but I really do like the way the quill writes. It makes sure everybody's handwriting looks so much better. And then here I'm just with the black ink pad, just going around the whole page. Oh, no, I take that back. That was not black. I believe that was a blue or purple stays on ink pad that I decided to go around the whole page just to frame it out. And there you have it. That is pretty much the page. I'm really glad that you stuck around, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.